Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Those of you who listen with any regularity know that I am on these airwaves every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and it's a pleasure always to have you listening. We have listeners from around the world, around the country, and New York City. All of the above. And it's wonderful to receive your comments, your emails, and appreciation of the show. In fact, on that note, let me open up by directing you to both the website, www.abetterworld.tv, where you can sign up for our weekly newsletter, which announces both who our guest will be on radio and on TV. We are aired every Tuesday night at this point in New York City, in particular in Manhattan, on A Better World TV, MNN, and you can access that also from our website, abetterworld.tv, so we make it very convenient for all to become part of A Better World community, whether that is your listening to the weekly radio show directly live or in archive and pass it on to your friends. Please pass it on. Or by listening to and watching the weekly TV show. We've been on for 20 years. Yes, folks. We've been on since March of 1993 and recently celebrated our 20th anniversary on the air. So yes, Mitchell Rabin, for all of these years, has been your host and guide through the turbulence of our life here on planet Earth and our heading toward a more open and bluer sky, something that we might even refer to as heaven. Dare we refer to it as such? You bet. And when you really reflect on human potential, which in many ways is going to be the subject of today's show with our guest, fellow psychotherapist, spiritually oriented psychotherapist, as I am, Kiara Windrider, who will be here in due time. He's actually just getting off an airplane from San Francisco and is speeding right along to our studio here in New York City, and will be arriving anon, as we say. The subject ultimately, as at least the way I frame it, is what is human potential? And we can look at it on the micro level, on the terrestrial level of how do we manifest on planet Earth with our various gifts, our skills, our talents, in whichever ways they manifest. And they do for all of us manifest in manifold ways. They really do. We have different kinds of intelligence. We have intellectual intelligence measured by IQ, the intellectual quotient. We have EQ, emotional intelligence, which is a way of understanding how do we relate to others and ourselves in the social domain of our lives. And then we also actually have kinesthetic intelligence, where our bodies are smarter than our ability to think or feel. We are a kinesthetic type, you could say, as discussed in neurolinguistic programming. And we have a keen sense of body awareness, of grace oftentimes. People with kinesthetic intelligence will oftentimes become dancers or consummate gymnasts or Olympians or athletes in general, or they will certainly just develop a dexterity with their hands or their feet and be able to communicate to the world through touch and even taste. It could lead to culinary skills. And so this is the kind of different kinds of intelligences and different kinds of potentials that are possible here for us on planet Earth. Now, if you want to take a larger stroke, a larger, broader view, which I'm pleased to say that Kiara does, we take a look at the influences of the solar system, and we take a look at even something he refers to is the galactic center. And scientists these days have been able to show that there are essentially frequencies emanating from this galactic center that are coming to us here on planet Earth. So we are not alone, folks. We are not alone. Get that little thought out of your head. We've all been so deeply programmed to think things a certain way. And what we understand through neuroscience these days, we have also come to see that we have entrained ourselves and have been entrained by our society, what Werner Erhard calls the background listening, or you could also call it, and he does, the cultural listening. That is the world into which we are born and the understandings of that culture. So to affect any kind of personal interchange is also to affect and bring about some form on some level of cultural change, and vice versa. Now, how does a culture change? There are any number of different variables which would cause cultural change, whether that's, you could say, society at large, or that's the culture of a corporation, or if it's a culture of a family. Every family has its own, you could say, myths, its own assumptions, its own rituals, its own belief systems, and its belief systems are embedded in its perceptions. You get that hierarchy. There's a very specific kind of hierarchy that comes from our neurophysiological makeup, if you will, composition, out of which begins to emanate everything all the way out to the culture of the globe itself. Now, the culture of the globe itself is rather a thin one because humans per tribe, if you will, per ken, per grouping, per family, per language group, per ethnicity, are rather different. And, of course, there are through lines. You know, let's look at that through line. One of them, of course, is the smile. A smile in any culture is an expression of warmth and ease and affability, possibly affinity, perhaps compassion, and certainly love. Isn't that cool? You and someone who speaks Mandarin can understand something of each other without a word spoken, simply by a look in the eye, the smile of an eye or two, and a smile of the lip or two. Interesting things come in pairs, don't they? Everything is symmetrical, if not bilateral, both. So you're following this simple thing. What is another common denominator of all people in language, but the language of the body. It's laughter, the use of humor. And you don't need spoken words for that either. It could be a prank fall, a pratfall. It could be a person like, the Charlie Chaplin or the Marx Brothers just carrying on without a word spoken. I mean, after all, Harpo doesn't say much, does he? But everybody gets it, and everybody laughs. It's cross-cultural. Cool? You bet. Now, why am I bothering to say this? Because I'm trying to show that while there are tremendous differences between us all, an enormous and desirable diversity on all levels, in all domains, there are certain common denominators of the human species through which we can relate to each other, we can acknowledge each other, we can befriend each other, and we can laugh together. We can smile together and create some sense of unity and brother and sisterhood. How cool. So when we talk about human potential, we're talking about something that reaches across horizontally in our world, on our earth, where we can help to be of service to each other and be united therein. And it's something that can reach vertically and access other beings of other species. Cross-species communication. How's that? I like that. Well, after all, there was a horse named Ed. Remember that? TV show way back when? The talking horse? And we've been anthropomorphizing so many animals for so long. Well, that's a form of cross-species communication. We really love that kind of thing. But even, I could say, how would I put this? Cross-extraterrestrial communication beyond the terrestrial realm of Earth. And we may see in due time that happening. I recently heard a really interesting radio show with Michio Kaku regarding the amount of garbage that is actually was on WMYC, that's right, the amount of cosmic garbage flying in the atmosphere around the moon and the troubles it's causing for the launching of satellites and the like. In other words, around our precious globe, our Earth, there's getting to be traffic jams of different sorts. And what is the first thing a human being does, those NASA-style humans who are trafficking up there? They're littering. Yes. They're not throwing debris away properly. They're actually beginning to litter the cosmos. And it's beginning to also become a problem. So this global awakening that we'll be speaking about with Kiara in short order, I just received a missive that he is in the taxi en route to our studio, will be to bring forward some of these subjects of human potential. And human potential, as we know from the fields of psychology and the field of living, becomes obscured through our emotional tensions, conflicts, and blocks. We do not perceive each other necessarily accurately or correctly or without distortion. And we need to. And we need to perceive ourselves as well, accurately, and in our true divine order, you could say, our true magnificence, our true spiritual legacy and inheritance. So that will be much of the subject of what we deal with in just a few minutes in my dialogue with Kiara, who I'd like to share a few words about in the form of his bio, Kiara is a trained psychotherapist and spent much of his early life traveling and practicing various spiritual traditions in India, where he is originally from, even though he has lived in this country for, I think, actually decades. A lifelong interest in environmental healing, peacemaking, and social justice led to a dual degree in peace studies and international development through Bethel College in Kansas. Later, he completed a graduate degree in transpersonal counseling psychology through JFK University in California and worked for many years at an alternative psychiatric center called Pocket Ranch Institute, which specialized in healing emotional trauma and facilitating spiritual emergence. He received a psychotherapy license from the state of California in 1998. He's also trained in various forms of body work, breath work, hypnotherapy, and shamanic healing. Well, my word, our backgrounds are awfully parallel, I could say that. Most recently, he has been developing and utilizing a healing system anchoring divine light called Ilahinoor, and that's an Arabic word for light. And, well, Noor is the word for light, but it has to do with connecting, you could say, to our light bodies. He has written 4 books: Doorway to Eternity, A Guide to Planetary Ascension, Deeksha, the Fire from Heaven, in which I have a chapter. I'm glad to say a rather robust and well-read chapter internationally. Journey into Forever, Surfing 2012 and Beyond, and Year Zero, Time of the Great Shift. Some people drop the letter F out of that word, but nonetheless, I think it's important for us to look at both. Oh, yes, bad humor, and my deep apologies to you all. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. We are on every Wednesday night. We were on Progressive Radio Network for a while, 7 or so years, with Gary Null. We have been on WBAI, Pacifica Radio in New York City, for many years off and on, being interviewed, as well as interviewing with such known personages as Kathy Davis and a number, Gary as well, and I've been on countless shows there involved in helping them fundraise, using some of our video TV interviews for fundraising there. And just know that that is another place for alternative media, which is becoming ever so more important in our daily lives as the things, yes, are getting revealed, but things at the same time are getting more and more, efforts to hide. But because Pluto is in Capricorn, for those of you who are astrologically configured and evolved, you will know that the influence of Pluto into the structure building, the empire building of Capricorn, will level anything and everything that does not stand in integrity. And that can be something as small as relatively fractally speaking, you could say, as a marriage, all the way up to the Vatican and the Catholic Church. Or, for that matter, it could be the government, ours or any government. Look at what the Arab Spring is bringing about, the toppling of governments, the changing of the rules, even Morsi being kicked out of office essentially by the people in concert with the Egyptian military, which is not a democratic process as such. However, in the true sense, it really is. It's very democratic because democracy, if you go back to the ancient Greek, is directly related to the will of the people. Demos, the people. And you cannot get out of it, even if it is not written in a constitution. Well, still, it is the law of the people. Whereas here, we have the law of the few, which is not democratic at all. Yet it is clearly the law of the land that is utilized. It is unwritten, and it is not democratic because it is not of and for the people. It is for the few. So we have a few tensions around that these days, But I do want to say that overall, you could interpret everything as moving slowly toward a greater sense of ourselves and our place on Earth and in the solar system and the galaxy. Oh, gosh, the universe itself. Now, these are huge words, and I do not bandy them about lightly. But I do want to say that our verticality is truly as important as our horizontality, okay? And it may sound funny because we're so horizontally inclined. That's an interesting way of putting it. Yes. Does that mean that, Mitchell, we like to lie down? Well, perhaps, but it's not limited to that. It's that we think along the earthly plane. We think of love. We think of money. We think of success. We think of prestige. We think of how are people seeing us? Are we approved by other people? Are we liked? Are we valued? Right? Isn't this the human enterprise? Are we being treated fairly and justly, or are we not? Are others of our grouping being treated fairly? Do we have a chance for success, material and otherwise? Who is in office? Who should be in office? Are the institutions properly representing our interests? All of these have to do with very earth-oriented activities and thoughts and emotions and moral issues and ethical issues, which we're designed to deal with. This is our domain, so it's all well and good. What's interesting, however, is that we're also designed to stand up straight, which means that our spine becomes like a walking, moving antenna that is perceiving information and energy and frequencies from any number of different loci that are earthly and otherwise. So when you begin to think this way, you begin to think like a human on 2 feet with his head toward heaven, his feet at the earth, on the earth, and the center in the middle. And we are modulating and mediating both heaven and earth. We receive the energy, the chi, from above, the intelligence, the wisdom of the universe, and we conduct it, you could say, through our spinal cord, through our nervous system, that fine, really delicate, graceful set of antennae to conduct data, information, through our bodies to our organs, including to our brain, and therefore mind, which of course is related to soul in some interesting way, and to our physical hearts and the emotional heart about it, the etheric heart. Got it? It's a really, really interesting setup. And then there are, of course, many bodies. It's not just our physical body. We have a mental body. We have an emotional body. We have an etheric body. We have an astral body. So many bodies that are basically emanations from the center. And, of course, it's very interesting if we really want to track it. The center is not a center the way we think of a center. just last night I was watching a video that was sent to me by one of our PR people, an interview with Dr. Raymond Moody, the author back in the early 70s of Life After Life, who was interviewing Dr. Eben, oh gosh, his last name is escaping me right now, who is a neurosurgeon formerly at Harvard, who is the author of Proof of Heaven. If any of you are able to email me or text me the last name of Eben, I would appreciate it so I can share it with everybody else. Anyway, it's very interesting because, you know, the domain that they are reaching into, as well as another book that I've just finished that I'm going to be interviewing the author of soon enough, The Afterlife of Billy Fingers, which I believe I have mentioned on the air before, how my bad boy brother proved to me there's life after death. It is awesome. Annie Kagan, former chiropractor and songwriter currently, and was and is, and the visitations she had by her brother, who was killed in a car accident after she was relocated out of Manhattan to the Hamptons, where she was spending a lot of time meditating. And her brother died and came to her many, 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 many times. And why am I bringing this up? Because I want to just invite you to open up and get to another space of what is possible. Because when we really contemplate what is possible, oh my God, our brains literally open up and we start cutting new neural pathways. And I've got to tell you, that's a lot of the game of this life. It's to be, when we're in the brain, cut new ones. And when we're not in the brain, enjoy whatever dimension you happen to have landed in. And the conversation in the video with the author of Proof of Heaven and Dr. Moody was focused on that subject of being in the other dimensions where brain activity does not even register. So, from one of our wonderful interns, Phyllis Prior, I have been fed the name Alexander. Now, Phyllis and everybody else, I don't know if you're going to believe me, but my mind had said prior to the I am, Alexander. Well, I guess I needed proof, didn't I? All right, good. Well, thank you very much for that. So, certainly it's a very interesting read. And soon we'll also have Julia Asante on, who wrote another book about life after death. This woman, oh my God, what a scholar she is. She's a scholar of Near Eastern ancient languages, Linear B, Sumerian, ancient Aramaic, etc. Really interesting woman who I did a TV interview with, and now we'll be airing that on A Better World in the upcoming future. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks so much for joining us, and know that we are on every Wednesday night, excuse me, at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Blog Talk Radio. And it can also be accessed through Blog Talk Radio archives or through ours, permanently on ours at www.abetterworld.tv, abetterworld.tv. And come and sign up for our newsletter, which goes out only once a week. It's free, and oftentimes I have a blog, but if I do not, it's interesting anyway, because you'll find out what we'll be talking about here on A Better World. And oftentimes, I don't know about often, but certainly periodically with some consistency, we open up the phones to you, the audience. And in fact, because Kiara is running a little late, I'm going to do exactly that right now. 602 753 1860. And while you're putting on your dancing fingers for pressing buttons on your telephone, I'm going to bring in a little Mozart for the dancing of your fingers. Welcome back to A Better World with your host, Mitchell J. Rabin. And I'm so glad you're joining us. And was anyone's fingers interested in dancing over the numbers during Mozart? Well, I haven't heard from anybody just yet. 602 753 1860. You know, based on our childhood and even before that, intra-utero, and I really do emphasize that space. I think it's a very important one. That helps to form the way we perceive. That's the game, folks, because the way we perceive forms our attitude. And, of course, it forms our belief system. Is the cup half full or is the cup half empty? As Einstein posed the question, is the universe friendly? And depending on how we respond to that question, our life can be full of good feeling, well-being, and joy, or it can be filled with a lot of cynicism, a lot of skepticism, a lot of pessimism. And it's possible that we all have a dosage of each. I don't think any one person is only one way. We are much more complex organisms than that would admit. So we want to kind of objectify our own subjective experience of reality. Going back in utero is the way I like to put it. Really go back on a search, on a mission, on an adventure, and begin to see what it must have been like for you to go from being an idea in your parents' heads to a manifestation as a result of a sperm and an egg coming together and forming a zygote. Who came up with that word? I'd like to know what that means. One cell, the original cell, and how we blossomed and flourished from that very one cell. But what's interesting is this. Even that cell has a magnificent, infinite intelligence. And it, too, just like our current-day nervous system, is picking up information from every single little corner and nook and cranny of the universe. Yeah. It sounds insane. It sounds outrageous. It doesn't seem possible. Except that it is. Because it is in fractal relationship with everything else, not only under the sun, beyond the sun. Do you get that? This is really rather notable. If you can see that there is a holographic relationship between all things, then you can get to see that everything has the nature of everything else in it. Do any of you know the notion, the medieval notion of the doctrine of signatures? It's this idea that things growing in nature look like the things they heal in the human body. The mandrake root, for instance, which looks like a little human if you looked at it, was considered an excellent tonic for all things impure in the body. Interesting. The aconite seed, which looks like an eye staring at thee, would be used then for eye problems. You get the message. There's this idea of an analog in nature wherever we go. So, okay, great. Wherever we go, we are looking at ourselves. You could say, I've said it so many times, it's like a hall of mirrors. That's what our entire cosmos is. And as you begin to free yourself from the locked-in, inherited neurology, the arrangement of the synapses as inherited by your parents and from your ancestry, which has its own richness, by the way, when you step out of that, you can begin to see things from another point of view. And talking about other points of view, I am very pleased to welcome our guest for today's show, Kiara Windrider, who you've been hearing me talk about so much. And Kiara, welcome.
Hey, good to see you, Mitchell.
Good to see you too. This is wonderful. Exactly. After years, Hold that up. So
Okay, is this on a speakerphone?
No, I don't think so. Hello, hello. I don't think so.
Okay.
It should be like that. Yeah.
Well,
you are all witnessing, bearing witness to the first time Kiara and I have been together since 2005, Kiara.
Wow.
Wonderful to see you, my friend.
Yeah, lovely
my
to see you.
My brother in psychology and spirit and everything.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. How was your flight, first of all?
Oh, once I figure out it was the
right.
What happened, it was perfect. Yeah, so
good.
A little bit late arriving, but sounds like you kept people busy.
Oh yes, we were scanning the universe, and you were waiting for you to arrive, and going from our little dendrites in our brain all the way to the galactic center and back. We were just talking about, when you walked in, the notion of fractal relationships, so that even the zygote has the information of all things on the planet.
Everything in the universe.
In the universe. Everything.
Yeah.
And then I moved into the doctrine of signatures, which is the idea of the cosmos staring back at you with its own information. And so things like the aconite seed, which looks like an eye in seeds in nature, is used as a remedy for eye problems.
Interesting, yeah.
As an example, right? It's a medieval notion called the doctrine of signatures. So it's just a way of describing the cosmic hall of mirrors.
Right.
Which, this is our trip. This
Microcosm is macrocosm, just
that's exactly right.
Backwards. Yeah.
Exactly. As above, so below, and as within, so without.
Yeah.
And if we can get that, we can see that we're really brother and sister with all.
Yeah. And if we really start looking at our internal structures and see where they get in the way of our relationship with the external structures, then enlightenment is all the way across within and without, and all of the ranges in between. So it's like, so many of our traditions have spoken about seeking for enlightenment as if it was some ultimate reality out there. But I'm realizing more and more that it's about entering into the physical body, into the cellular structures, into the DNA, all the way deep inside to the matrix that we carry of all the stuff that we've generated for thousands of years of human history, and entering deeply into that enough and transforming it.
Yes, absolutely. That's beautiful. And that's where our minds and our emotions need to be, in a sense, followed through to our actual cellular structure.
Yeah.
And appreciate that the emotions live there too.
Yeah.
In fact, you could ask the question, where else do they live?
what else is emotion?
Right.
Energy and motion.
That's right.
And
exactly. And it has to have a physiological resting place.
Right.
You know.
Well, that's what I like so much about Sri Aurobindo's work, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about this descent of light, the supramental field, descending into matter, into the cells, and that's enlightenment on a physical level. It's not so much anymore about leaving behind the physical material realities and ascending into cosmic realms, but bringing that cosmic realm into the physical body, transforming matter itself.
Exactly.
And that's God
in action.
Right. You know, God incarnating as who we are.
In the material realm instead of leaving the material. It's sort of like, and that's a very profound thing that you're saying, Kiara, because Sri Aurobindo was very much a product of his time, of the Indian mentality, which had a lot to do with leaving the physical dirt bag, as it was referred to, the body, behind for something other and bigger and better that was a cosmic understanding. I
would say that's a false interpretation of Indian or Hindu religion or tradition, because ultimately the Advaita teaching is that it's all one, it's the same, not two. So cosmic, divine reality beyond time and space and material human reality in personal form is the same thing, just a reflection of one is not illusion relative to the other.
I agree. I'm not going to say that it was textual. I mean that it is written that is the understanding. But I want to say that the practice, the
practices have been more dualistic.
Was more what I was referring to, which is almost like they were copying the Catholic Church or something. I don't know what happened, but Sri Aurobindo was one who, of some, but he was truly a leader in bringing back the wisdom that you're referring to, of finding the higher intelligence right smack in the physical realm, in the physical body, which I appreciate. Along those lines, would you tell us about, I kind of was feeding the audience with some notions about Ilahinoor, which is something that you have very much been cultivating over the last few years since I've seen you. It's so good to see you. You know? And will you share with our audience, really like them to get the download
to share more about this. So before I say anything about Ilahinoor, I just want to set the context.
Please.
Because, it's not just a technique or a healing form, although it may look like it. It's really about a state of being. And it's going beyond even our created time-space realities into this galactic source, which we are, and then bringing that source energy into physical matter and transforming it. So it's really understanding that we are not separate. So when we talk about Advaita, when we talk about who we are as the divine presence, this is Ilahinoor. Ilahinoor in Arabic and Turkish means divine light. But Noor is the quality of divine light that permeates everything. It's not out and beyond, above.
Embodied.
It's embodied. It's like, the quantum reality. It's within everything. You talked about fractal realities. It's the fractal light that is not the opposite of darkness. It's a unified light that's beyond the duality of dark and light. So in that sense, it's like, it's the ability to penetrate deep into the heart of matter, into our subconscious matrix, and release the shadows of duality, which creates separation, which creates fear, which creates war, which creates greed, which creates all the polarity of human conditioning for thousands of years. So it's the ability to bring this light into the density of matter in a way that matter is not seen as separate, dualistic form anymore, but is seen equally as one with the light. Matter is simply a denser frequency of light. You cannot make a distinction between light and dark or spirit and matter, even though that's much of our conditioning.
It's really it's just more concentrated.
It's more concentrated.
Densified.
And it's also the cutting edge of evolution. because through our nervous system, God or ultimate reality, whatever we call that force, is incarnating more fully than ever before. In 13.6 billion years of creation, evolution,
we should be getting somewhere.
And it's been like a exponential curve, and right now it's like right at the vertical peak of this curve where things are happening so quickly, so fast, because it's now finally conscious evolution, not unconscious evolution anymore.
Talk about that. Talk about the whole evolutionary cycle, if you would, as you see it, and where we are now in the curve.
Yeah, so what I see
and
is...
not to mention the distinction between what was unconscious and when conscious evolution, from your view, kicked in.
So involution, evolution are mirrors of each other, depending on what perspective. So from the perspective of spirit, source, we are in involution. From the perspective of matter, nervous systems, bodies, we are in evolution. So it's really the unification of these two identities that this work is about, that these times are about. So evolution and involution become one process, one single act. So in a sense, you could say God, as the ultimate reality, stepped into time and space in order to create new possibilities.
Or created time and space to create
the time and space itself, yes.
Right, as a container, if you will.
As a container for new possibilities, for a playground, for life.
Exactly, a sandbox.
To reflect itself, which we are. So that aspect of our being is now stepping into creation, and it's been stepping into creation for the last 13 billion years with more and more consciousness. So, when galaxies were first created, there was a unified consciousness that existed beyond the material form of a galaxy. But over the eons, it's developed into more and more complexity, more atomic elements, more biological life forms, cellular life into organic life, into mammalian life, into, human, dolphin, whale forms, which, it's debatable who's at the peak of creation, and it doesn't even matter, because what's happening is the planet herself is a life form.
I hope it's not us, Kiara.
I don't know. I think we'd be in big trouble if we but I think the planet herself is an organism who is conscious, who's living, who's Gaia, and she's the one who's evolving into this next stage. We happen to be part of her. We are the nervous system of Gaia.
Indeed.
We may be the left brain of Gaia, and whales and dolphins happen to be the right brain of Gaia. But
it's a nice way of putting it. That's a nice, interesting perspective.
I think there's such a kinship here.
Yes.
But because of the evolving nervous system, we can actually anchor more and more of this cosmic frequency of light, which we can call God, and anchor that into the body, into creation, in a way that it can then self-reflect back and see itself for the first time. So that's when involution and evolution meet together and become God in motion. So the creator aspect of a being and the created aspect of a being become one. And that's what Ilahinoor, back to Ilahinoor, this is what Ilahinoor is about. Because it allows for this higher frequency of our galactic being or intergalactic being to enter into creation, and the only thing that's obstructing us from recognizing ourselves for who we are is the subconscious matrix of duality and separation. It's such a conditioning that we have developed over lifetimes, over eons, of seeing ourselves as separate. It's not true that we are separate. It's a belief system that we are separate. And once you buy into that belief system, it is so. So now that is the illusion. The illusion is not that matter is less than spirit. The illusion is that matter is separate from spirit.
Exactly.
That's my
very important distinction. Exactly.
Yeah.
Or that matter is not real. So, hearkening back again to the Indian perspective of Maya, or the Japanese Makyo, the idea of illusion, many interpret that as meaning that what we see is not real. But that's not true. You are real. I am so glad you're real.
How else can we reflect each other?
How could we? We're very real, but what is unreal is fear.
Yeah.
And that duality that we have become by conditioning anchored to.
And there are so many faces of fear.
Yeah.
And the ultimate face of fear is the idea of separation.
That's right.
And that is it's identical to the fear of death, the fear of change, the fear of loss, because all of this is illusion. That's what's illusion.
Right. That's what's illusion.
And what this Ilahinoor work is about is entering into those roots of illusion, which is the thinking, it's basically conditioned by the thinking mind, and it's part of the subconscious mind, entering deeply enough into the subconscious mind, which is allied with physical matter, and then bringing that light into transform matter in such a way that the superconscious realms can penetrate and transform the subconscious realms. It happens without the interference of the thinking mind, and that's why it's so powerful.
Yes.
Because anything, I used to be a therapist. I was a therapist for 20 years, working with people in all kinds of ways, body, mind,
I still
spirit.
am.
Yeah. And it's like, those insights are powerful. The work is useful, but somehow it's like it's still being giving ascendancy to the thinking mind rather than higher aspects of the mind. Like Sri Aurobindo, for instance, he talks about 5 levels of the mind beyond the thinking mind.
Mm-hmm.
So,
speak about those, would you?
This is useful. The Egyptians talk about this also, but Sri Aurobindo says that there's the higher mind, which is able to see a much bigger perspective relative to the thinking mind. So it's the ability to jump up a notch and see the big picture. Beyond that is the illumined mind, where what you're seeing is beyond duality. We are seeing things as they are rather than what they appear to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then beyond that is the intuitive mind, where you're not seeing from the outside anymore. You're seeing from the inside. So if I'm seeing you, I'm becoming you. Then there's no separation between you and I, no object, no subject, just you-ness, me-ness, isness. Beyond that even is the archetypal realm, the overmind, where, this is the realm where you're even touching the boundaries of creation. The gods and goddesses, all the, the mythical realms are all part of this overmind. And then beyond that is this supermind, which is the mind of God. And what he says is this, and this is beyond time and space even. Yeah. This is beyond even archetypes. This is a creative force which can enter into
it's
creation.
It's the creative force that's really pre-creation.
Pre-creation. Yeah. It's the ultimate field of possibilities, all possibilities, not just creative possibilities. And this is who we are. This is the level of mind that is incarnating in us and through us. This is what's entering into the cells of the body, awakening the DNA. Scientists say 95% of our DNA potential is unused. It's junk. This is what's, behind the junk.
Right.
And it's like,
they say that also the mind is, we use 5% of the brain.
Right.
So,
So our nervous system is not...
Who the hell are we anyway?
Yeah, so this is the supramental force that's now entering into consciousness, into the earth. It's activating new potentials that have never been seen before. So when we see the chaos and the confusion and the problems that exist in the world, that's from this perspective, these are minuscule. Einstein said once that you cannot solve the problems of the world from the same level of consciousness that created those problems. But if you transcend that level of consciousness, then it's easy. And what's happening is not that we are trying to achieve some supramental reality. The supramental reality is entering into our creation. It's proactive.
Yes.
We are simply vehicles for this. All we can do is surrender and open, and then watch this living force come through into daily life, into this earth, this beautiful planet.
Oh my God!
And
completely. That's one of the reasons there's such great sadness
yeah.
in watching the desecration, quite literally, of our precious planet, which is a sacred temple for many of us.
Right.
And it really is being desecrated by the
unconscious, ignorant forces.
Exactly, of reality. So you put it all very beautifully and elegantly, and I really appreciate it. At the same time, we are all, even those of us who have had a taste of the unified field beyond the duality, are still living within the space of and the life of and the society of and the culture of duality.
Yeah.
And so, how to bring some of this more awakened mind in to that and not invalidate the experiences people are having on the horizontal level.
It's making a bridge instead.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is the key to the Ilahinoor work as well.
Yeah.
So what I was given some years ago by Ra, the Egyptian deity of the sun, was that there's a part of the brain, I mean, this is all supported by biochemistry and brain physiology now, that there's a part of the brain which we now know as the limbic system, which is connected with the instinctive centers of mind and the emotional centers of mind. This is, Sri Aurobindo refers to different stages of human evolution. This would be the animal-human stage. So it's the instinctive human, where everything is based on survival, everything is based on the need to compete with another in order to survive. And so from that perspective comes separation.
I just interrupt for one moment. It's just to say, Kiara, that feature of Darwinian thinking has been proven to be wrong.
Yeah.
It's not even
cooperation
accurate.
Is even much more a fact than competition.
By all means.
But this is this is one aspect of what we've created.
Yes.
The economic, political,
it's not biological.
Social systems are basically competitive in nature.
Right.
It's a belief system that's entered into our economic structures.
It's permeated all aspects of society.
And it's time to go back.
But it's not biological. That's the point.
Yeah, good point. I mean, that's very true. And now we're going back to sacred commerce, sacred politics, sacred relationships, sacred everything else, which recognizes the unity behind the duality.
Yes.
Okay, so this part of the brain, the limbic system, when it's connected directly to the higher parts of the brain, including the chakra system, including the axiotonal lines, which are extensions of the meridian system, acting through the frontal lobes, then there's a potential, there's a bridge created through which higher energies can flow into the body through the heart, activate the heart, so you're not, caught up in the monkey mind, the static of the thinking mind. You're able to penetrate deeply into that stillness, that still small voice which speaks from the heart, which is the voice of, which is the wisdom of the body. And once you make that connection between the superconscious and the subconscious through this bridge, this physiological bridge, that's simply a part of how our brains are structured, then something magical happens, which is that this new awareness begins to arise. Old patterns, beliefs, conditionings just automatically disperse. It's like the light comes in, it's like a fog that gets lifted in the light of the morning sun. And then as that fog gets lifted, more light can come in, more fog gets lifted, until eventually there's just this passage without obstruction between a higher self and a lower self. In that sense, there is no separation anymore between the Atman as the higher self.
No perceived separation.
And the perceived separation, yes. So the personality self and the soul structures come into unity, or come into perceived and intentional unity. They act as one. They're yoked together. That's what yoga means.
Yes.
They're yoked together, union. and it's easy, and it's it's just fun. Life becomes synchronistic and joyful because there's not one aspect of the mind that's in competition and trying to obstruct another part of the mind. So usually what happens, and this is what people, when they talk about the law of attraction, don't see how the subconscious mind is so much stronger than the conscious mind. So when you're trying to attract something with your conscious mind and disregard the power of the subconscious, and meanwhile you're trying to bully the subconscious mind, which is basically the child self. When people talk about the inner child, we become the bullies of this child and then expect the child to respond.
Favorably. Respond, right.
Yeah. Meanwhile, it's digging in its heels and throwing a tantrum.
Exactly.
So here we are, the subconscious and the conscious, getting into this battle with each other.
Yeah.
The kahunas say that the middle
ancient
self,
Hawaiian teachings.
The middle self, which is the conscious personality, cannot directly access the higher self. But the middle self can begin to make friends with the low self, which is already connected with the higher self. So that's what we're doing with this bridging. So the middle self is the personality is choosing, intending to create a bridge between the higher self and the low self, allowing it to happen without interfering with the process, without squishing the low self, without being programmed by the low self. So it's like, when are we going to make friends with the lost parts of our being?
Exactly.
It's simply lost. It's not about, it's not evil, bad, negative. It's just lost and ignorant aspects of our being that we need to bring into light. Embrace them.
Uninformed, uneducated, unenlightened, quite literally.
So whether we're talking about aspects of our own being or aspects of that being that are fractally reflected out in other people in our life.
Yes.
So when Carlos Castaneda talks about the worthy adversary. When you meet the worthy adversary, whether it's in a dictator of a nation, benign or otherwise, whether we, democratic or otherwise, or someone that we just can't stand in an intimate relationship. Our intimate relationships are perfect mirrors for what we are not willing to see and not able to see in ourselves. Whether they're lovers, mothers, fathers, children.
So upon our
brothers,
seeing
sisters, upon us, then it's like the mirror is clear. And then there's forgiveness. Forgiveness is simply letting go of the idea that there was anything to forgive. Because then once you see that I am you, like the Mayas say, in Lakesh, I am another you.
Yes.
Then there is no more separation. There's nothing left to forgive.
And of course, even as the Indians would say, namaste.
Yeah.
Is a similar notion.
The divinity in me bows to the divinity in you.
Exactly.
No hierarchies. I am not better, worse, other.
And the higher self isn't better than the lower self either.
That's the truth.
That's a very important thing.
Yeah, and that I think is the ultimate disempowerment within religion. Because all religions tend to experience the human self, or not experience, they tend to point to the human self as lower than the divine self.
Exactly.
Whereas what's happening is the reverse. God is incarnating into the human in order to discover itself for the very first time. I mean, that's a completely different perspective.
Ask yourself the question, Kiara. Why would God, the intelligence of the entirety of the universe and beyond, create matter unless he wanted it to matter? It doesn't make sense. Everything could have been this beautiful, placid, immaterial lake, pond of perfection and tranquility.
Yeah.
But brought forward the perturbation, if you will, of the material, of his material or hers material face, which leads to things like the alternation of sun and moon, of day and night, of yin and yang, on purpose, not by some kind of cosmic mistake.
I think the problem has been that humans have interpreted a natural polarity of life and seen it as duality. And they're two very different things. Polarity is simply yin and yang, night following day.
Exactly.
Dark following
male
light,
and female.
Male, female. Duality is one. You pick one of the pair of opposite, and make it good.
And stick with it.
Stick with it. And then the other automatically becomes bad. And then you project, reject, deny, repress, oppress, and suppress.
And depress.
And depress.
And none of it impresses.
None of that impresses.
I'm being reminded of our days in Golden City, Kiara, when we would spend time spinning yarns and laughing our fool heads off. You know?
Laying under the stars and becoming them.
Oh, yes, indeed. You know, those were the days, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
it's interesting. It's just about 7-8 years ago. So the full,
it's true.
Cycle in a way.
That's right. Exactly. 2004 and 2005, we were there together.
Yeah.
And, around March, February, March, January, February, March.
Right.
But truly. And many of the subjects we were discussing are very much like this. So my understanding of Ilahinoor is coming from the perspective of the value of Deeksha, or this, call it a cosmic blessing. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, Deeksha, for many of us, has been like a major, awakening.
Yes.
And for me, it was a partial awakening.
Yes.
I also had to recognize that the ground element is equally important. The earth element, the body element, the lower chakras. And the fact that, the electrical magnetic energies are one electromagnetic field. Deeksha represents the electrical field. There's also the magnetic field. Ilahinoor as a whole represents both. So it's about bringing the higher vibrational field, the cosmic light, you could call it, into the body, transforming the body, connecting with the earth, transforming the earth. So it's like we become channels through, it's not just for our own personal enlightenment, which I don't believe in anymore. The idea of personal enlightenment is a
myth.
A myth. Because if there was a person to become enlightened, that is not what enlightenment is about.
Right.
It's about going past personhood into a collective organism, into the recognition that we're not separate on a deep physical level from each other, from the earth, from life, from creation.
I'm so glad to hear you say this. There is this idea that Bruce Lipton has been talking about, and I've heard from a few different others, of the superorganism.
Yeah.
And there's this idea of truly going beyond the definition of self, and we really are at that juncture, I believe.
Exactly. And I think, Peter Russell talks about this in The Global Brain also. And he says,
which is 30 years old or so.
Yeah. So it's like, when you get to a certain order of magnitude.
Understanding.
So you have 10 billion is a number that seems to represent this order of magnitude. So when you have 10 billion cells vibrating together, creating a nervous system, that was a step up from a multi-cell organism to living to a mammalian.
It's another level of complexity along the path.
And now it's like we have 10 billion nervous systems in human body. The next step is we have a single organism, which is a superorganism, which is the nervous system of the earth, of Gaia.
There you go.
So this is the development of Gaia as a conscious, awake, living being, stepping into the cosmos as her own, as a completely new organism, not an unconscious wholeness, but a conscious wholeness. A conscious coming together of all the species on this planet, each finding their own place within this web of life.
Yes.
each supporting each other in the web of life, balancing each other in the web of life, and then recognizing that there's a whole galaxy up there which is also part of the same body. And this is conscious unity. So starting off from undifferentiated reality, God as undifferentiated reality, we step into differentiation, duality, which is a necessary part of evolution, and then conscious awakening within this as differentiated but united being. And that's a whole new ball game. And that's what Sri Aurobindo is referring to as the supramental descent.
Yes.
And that is what I see as the Ilahinoor field. It's a morphogenetic field whose purpose it is to unite the physical body with the light bodies, with body and spirit, God and human, earth and spirit. So it's not one or the other, but both and.
Yes.
And experiencing for the very first time ever as creator, So it takes us away from this whole victim stance. I'm somehow, the victim of human interference on the planet, or the victim of someone else telling me what to do or creating disturbances in my life. It puts me in the driving seat as creator, not separate from anyone else, but stepping up the concept of creation itself. So at this point, synchronicities are all that exist. And there's no such thing as accident, chance, cause, or effect.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is synchronicity.
Yes.
Vibrating together in this fractal
universe.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
It reminds me actually a bit of the notions in Taoist alchemy of the integration of the heavenly energies, the cosmic energies, with the earthly, and that our being, our physical vessel, is the place for the alchemy, where the container for that to occur.
Yeah.
And so we mix the energies from above that are galactic and cosmic in nature, and have their intelligence with the wisdom of the earth.
Right.
And we stand between the two as humans.
Right. Yeah, I love the word alchemy.
Yeah.
It's like something deep and rich emerging from this foundation.
Exactly.
Lead turning into gold.
That's
base,
right.
Base matter, base
light,
emotions,
base elements,
base emotions,
the
elements of our own being.
Exactly.
Transforming into divine
exactly.
grace.
Being refined.
And
such.
also that means a refinement of a vibrational frequency.
Surely.
Which is what's key to this process as well.
Yes.
It's like our physical vibration, the vibrational frequency is changing. And this is not just happening for those of us who are spiritually conscious. In fact, scientists are telling us now, like Alexei Dmitriev in Russia, that the base harmonic frequency of all matter in the solar system is stepping up.
Yes.
This may have to do with the Fibonacci spiral, who knows.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow it's like this is what's causing all the
perturbations.
Yeah.
I was talking before you got here, I was making reference to the idea, Kiara, of the Arab Spring as an example. And that came out of speaking of the astrological reality of Pluto in Capricorn right now, which the Plutonian energy disrupts anything and everything that does not stand in its own integrity. And because it's in Capricorn, although it's spread out a bit, but Capricorn represents institutions and empires.
Right.
So you see a faltering and a leaking, if you will, in the United States government of its venerable structures, its sacrosanct hallowed halls. There's a leakage occurring, i.e. Snowden and others.
Right.
You look at the Vatican, and you see the same thing where the butler of the Pope came forward and said just, 6-8 months ago, aha, we see things that are not kosher, or I should say, ethical, here in the Vatican at the very highest level, the Pope. And, boy, they shut him up real fast. But what we see is that
they stepped down the Pope immediately after.
Exactly. We see a disintegration, which is another way of saying disintegrity. It needs to happen.
A reintegration of integrity.
And then a reintegration, exactly. It's creating the openness, the space for. First, there's got to be the emptying of that which is not pure and standing in integrity for a rebuilding or recreation. And the Arab Spring, same thing. In all of the countries in which it's occurred. It's happening here.
In Turkey. It's happening.
Exactly. Turkey, where you live. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole... what's it? Occupy.
The Occupy movement, exactly, was blowing the whistle.
And
on that.
One aspect of this also, which I haven't heard too many astrologers speaking about yet, is the fact that the United States, as a nation, was born in 1776. Pluto is a 248-year cycle.
Oh,
so in 2024. 2024, which is 10 years from now, the United States is going to go through its first Pluto return, which is, complete annihilation of anything that's not in integrity, so it can be reformed into its truest form. And the United States is a symbol of this rising culture around the planet.
Yes.
So it's happening. This process of death and rebirth, the resurrection of the phoenix energy, that's key to what we're seeing in all levels: social, political, economic, spiritual, psychological, relational, educational, everything. And this is also part of what I see as, the shift from the dualistic worldview to a unitive worldview.
Yes, exactly.
It cannot be
very important. And
divorced.
I want to bring up another distinction now that you said that. I think is very important because I think it's a place for a lot of misunderstanding. Being related to the unified field doesn't mean sameness.
Right.
It doesn't mean some kind of homogenized self where distinctions and differences are annihilated. Not at all. It is understanding the underlying reality of unification of all matter and spirit, out of which comes the magnificence of the diversity of nature.
It's the uniqueness of every life form.
Exactly.
Diversity as uniqueness, not sameness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's how nature was designed, to adapt to varying conditions.
Yeah.
It requires uniqueness. Hence, ethnicity, different color, different gender of people, of everything. It requires the uniqueness of all beings, of all cultures, of all ethnicities,
That's what the web of life is about.
It sits there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
and stands there. I want to just go back to something when you were talking about the kahuna. I was kind of giggling to myself a little bit because you reminded me of something I say to people when I teach and do sessions with people is, the popular idea, Kiara, of we are all spiritual beings having a human experience or trying to have one. Well, I say to people, before that, we are animals trying to have a human experience. Let's start there and work our way up,
Yeah. Well, that's a good place to...
It's really kind of interesting when you think about that middle self that you were talking about, making friends with the lower self instead of first with the higher self.
Yeah.
That phrase I came up with of animals to human
and understanding
would be that bridge.
Right. And the stages of evolution, you cannot ignore or bypass a stage. So Sri Aurobindo talks about the animal human, then the human, then the divine human, and then finally the supramental human. I'll define it a little bit.
There you go.
The animal human is Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, that instinctive center. Not to say that it was just about instinct of competition, like we talked about, but instincts of survival.
Yes.
Tribal
it had a different
community
sensory system developed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. In fact, quite literally, if I may just add to that, the olfactory sense was way more important than the visual at first, because that's closer to our midbrain.
Yes. Yeah. Then came along the human. So, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens.
Right.
So this is where the thinking mind starts to develop. It's a transitional state, according to Sri Aurobindo. So it's not a complete stage in itself. The animal human is a complete stage in itself. It could have continued forever. This stage is a transitional stage into the divine human stage. So the thinking mind, has precedence here, but it's not meant to be the governor of
the all end all.
Yes,
exactly.
It's only a step. So when Sri Aurobindo talks about the 5 levels of the mind beyond this thinking mind, that's what we identify with as the divine human. This is the bridge that we're creating next. So in this next phase of evolution, as the divine human, we become part of the nervous system of the planet, experience ourselves as one with the Gaia organism, and then from that point on, we become a planetary organism. And that to me is what enlightenment is about. That to me, people also talk about ascension. But what ascension of what? It's also the descension of divine spirit into the body as part of the evolution of God itself, herself, himself, whatever. So then even that's not the end. So Sri Aurobindo talks about the 4th stage, which is a supramental human, which is when the physical body has become so transformed that the vibrational structure of the body can hold the multidimensional frequency of the soul in a way that the two become one. So you can actually move the physical body around in time, in space, fluidly. The body can exist on prana without the need for physical sustenance, food, water, and so on. It can communicate telepathically, so now we have become so dependent on the internet. This is the internet, which is the next stage beyond, the telepathic links. We have access to all the information, all the knowledge of all the universes, because that is simply who we are. But bringing that into the cells of the body, which the body wisdom is so much smarter than the mind wisdom that we know, the thinking mind so far.
Oh my.
So this really is the evolutionary path, or involutionary path, same thing.
Yes.
And it's so much beyond anything that we can imagine today, which is why I say, our current stage of evolution is just like a kindergarten stage compared to, what we are emerging into. And it could be that this generation is the pivot.
Yes.
And there's reasons for this, which I could go into, from a science perspective also.
Why don't you?
Okay, well, this has been
take a few minutes.
This has been a big part of my own research. My book, Year Zero, Time of the Great Shift, is a research of this particular awareness. It started for me in looking at Hindu calendar systems, Mayan calendar systems, ancient prophecies, the idea that we're evolving. But there was always this uneasiness, okay, if you're evolving, how does this happen? There must be a mechanism for this. We don't suddenly wake up on December 21st, 2012 as awakened beings. There's a mechanism. What is that mechanism? And so about 10 years ago, I met an astrophysicist, Dr. Paul Laviolette. And in our conversations together then and since, much of the science behind this has started to come together. And so one thing he talks about is that creation did not just happen once. He talks about the theory of continuous evolution. So it's not just once at the Big Bang, but it's an event that takes place from the centers of galaxies during the active phase of their life. So maybe 10 to 20% of their life history is active, which is when the galaxy, or the mother star of a galaxy, the center is emitting cosmic waves, gamma rays, X-rays, and so on, in extreme volumes, which is like a wave that if you drop a stone into a pond, you have ripples extending out from the center. It's exactly the same thing, except it's spherical this time. So from the center of a galaxy, there's concentric waves extending out throughout the Milky Way. When this wave crosses a solar system, which happens approximately every 12,000 years, there's direct
emanations,
repercussions.
Yeah.
So what happens is that to understand the solar system, all things are electromagnetic fields. So the electromagnetic boundary of a solar system is referred to as a heliopause. It's like the edge of our solar system. It's highly charged, protective electromagnetic particles. So when you have this galactic superwave blasting its way through the Milky Way, hitting the outer edge of a solar system, the first thing that happens is kapoof. The outer edge of a solar system breaks down. And what happens, and this is temporary, and you have extreme amounts of cosmic dust entering into the solar system, gravitationally attracted by the sun and all the other planets. So, guess what? All the planets in a solar system are heating up from the core, including the Earth. From the core. I'm not talking about global warming from the surface. I'm talking about the core. And then you have the sun herself going through extreme cycles. So this is, again, solar flares, coronal mass ejections. This is also a 12,000-year cycle that's related to the galactic superwave cycle. This, in turn, leads to a cycle on the Earth. So at a certain point, you have enough magnitude solar flares and coronal mass ejections blasted out through solar winds towards Earth that the magnetic north-south axis collapses. And this happens periodically and can be measured in the
ice core. Is that the shift of the magnetic poles you're referring to?
So I'm not talking about a geographical pole shift. I'm talking about a magnetic pole reversal. And what scientists are seeing now is that the north polar axis is tilting very, very quickly, relatively speaking. So like 200 years ago, there was a mild fluctuation around its north axis. Then the axis started to tilt and gradually getting more exponentially.
And more wobble.
More wobble. And then it's not just wobbling, but tilting. So about 10 years ago, it was tilting at the rate of about 70 miles a year, which was extremely fast compared to previous years. In fact, it was twice as fast as in the 50 years before that, which was twice as fast as the 150 years before that. And now, I read a report a couple months ago saying that this tilt is moving at the rate of 1 mile a day, which is 5 times what it was 10 years ago. So something is going on here. Yeah. So what this means is that we could be close to a time of a magnetic collapse, electromagnetic collapse. And what scientists say is that this collapse could last, it usually lasts a very short time, a few hours, at most 2 or 3 days. And then there's a reversal, magnetic north and south reverse, switch places. This is pivotal in the sense that all evolution happens during these magnetic reversals, going back to the beginnings of Earth's history. So, many biologists are now understanding this, that Darwinian evolution was incomplete. It just doesn't happen gradually with missing links that have never been found, but there are quantum shifts in between. So you have the whole web of life interacting, and then suddenly it changes. Species go extinct, millions of new species are birthed, all in one generation. And these happen during the times of magnetic reversal. So technically what happens is the same thing that happens when a galactic wave penetrates the heliopause, the outer shield of the solar system. When the magnetic field of the Earth collapses, which is the Van Allen belts, suddenly you have all this cosmic radiation which has been sitting outside, bombarding the Earth. Guess what that does to our genetics? So it's like maybe a dozen, 100 times more cosmic radiation moving through our genetic system. Now, if it happened during...
our entire biological structure, all of
the Earth's biological structure.
Yes, exactly.
So there's something very special that happens during this time, though. Now, if this bombardment took place during a normal time, nothing would survive on Earth. It'd just be too much radiation. Imagine Fukushima.
Too intense, exactly.
Fukushima multiplied 100,000 times.
Right.
But something else is going on at this time, which is really the key to evolution, as I see it, which is that our bodies are connected to Earth's magnetic field. Whether we're talking about the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, or the higher structures, the higher emotional, mental, etheric bodies. They're all connected. What makes us human, or what makes us living, as any organism on Earth, is the fact that we're connected to these electromagnetic fields. So during this reversal, or preceding the reversal during the collapse, it's like the links between these different separate bodies collapse as well. So here you are, Mitchell, talking on the phone, suddenly you can't think. Suddenly your senses can't perceive. Suddenly your physical body goes through extreme magnetic variations. You go into a state of coma, trance, deep sleep. It happens just like that. I mean, there may be a period leading up to it, so it's not like it takes you by total surprise. But during that time, and the Mayas talk about this as 3 days of darkness. And during this time, it's not darkness in a sense that the sun has anything to do with it, but it's internal darkness, just like a caterpillar would experience when it goes inside this cocoon. So it's a cocooning phase, where its ordinary perceptions of life, its ordinary sense of realities and identity dissolves. So who we are as the human stage of evolution dissolves. We let go of the entire matrix of our subconscious mind. That movie Matrix is so accurate.
Yes.
Is that this is our perceived identity that's become real because we've believed it to be so.
For so long.
And that suddenly collapses. So who am I?
Right.
If it's not this. Then the soul matrix begins to integrate. And the identity of the divine human begins to emerge.
And the galactic human.
All this is part of the cocooning. So just like a caterpillar goes into the cocoon, all the juices start to dissolve. It actually liquefies, literally. Not that that's going to happen to us necessarily, but that's what happens to the caterpillar. And then new DNA starts being activated. It's a metamorphosis. And then the butterfly emerges, a new species, a new stage of evolution. And this is happening on a Gaia level to all life, So they could, and we've assisted in this, Human interference has caused the extinction of so many species on this planet.
Yes.
A tenth of the species are already gone. But it may not be, outside of divine plan. What I'm saying is that there's a much greater intelligence behind all this. There's a Gaia intelligence behind all this. And just because species are going extinct doesn't mean that it's the end of Earth. Because during the magnetic reversal, new species would be created according to the intelligence of the interaction of Gaia, solar system, galactic systems, and our beingness beyond and now entering into creation. So this is what's creating, for the first time, a conscious new evolution where it's like waking up matter itself.
I understand. I have a different point of view on some of what you said, not fundamentally.
Yeah.
In fact, I would like to share that I learned of some of what it is you're saying regarding the 3 days of darkness from a source connected to Drunvalo. Melchizedek.
Is that Don Alejandro Cirilla?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I've met him too, but
yeah.
no, through Cal Garrison, who is Drunvalo's astrologer,
okay,
who I've had on the show, who wrote a book called 2012 and Beyond. And in my interview of her in Sedona, she outlined the process.
I'm curious to hear this.
It's really
Would
interesting.
you mind summarizing it? What?
Oh, yeah, you're summarizing, yeah. She goes into a little bit more depth of it. It's really interesting about that. It's very much the butterfly process, the chrysalis butterfly process.
So what's the mechanism, as she would describe it?
That's causing it?
Mm-hmm.
It's related to magnetic pole shift. Yeah.
And,
it's the same as
and
what
what
you're
would
saying.
be the distinct steps?
I don't remember right now what they are, except that there is a process. She didn't talk about internal darkness as such, as I recall, but just darkness.
Darkness as a metaphor for the mystery, going into the mystery.
Right, exactly. There is
the unknown.
A perception of nothing that we have known before. Do you know, for instance, there are those dark rooms? I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah, I've done darkroom retreats.
Right,
yeah,
that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a step beyond the flotation tank,
right,
which is the beginning of that kind of process, but a darkroom retreat, right, where you have access to nothing that you know essentially as familiar. And so your identity as the self that you were begins to relax. Your identity gets to relax altogether. Even your notion of survival and all of that gets to decontract.
Yeah, you just start to get out of the thinking mind altogether.
Right.
There's no more.
Curiously, you get more into the instinctive mind. It's almost like a recapitulation of human evolution.
And the instinctive mind is the gateway to the higher mind.
Yes.
And the high self, low self, middle self.
Absolutely. Hence, we are humans. We are animals seeking a human experience gains a little bit more weight at that moment,
Right.
And people laugh at me when I say that, like, oh my God, how unspiritual are you?
Well, that's presupposing that animals are somehow less than, but says who?
Exactly. That's completely right on.
Yeah.
Completely right on. But what the part that I would differ with is my own view, limited as it may be, does not just condone the unconscious or conscious destruction of sentient life on the planet as somehow part of divine order. I don't accept that. There are people who say anything and everything that happens is just part of a divine order. I don't accept that myself. I see it as a distortion of a divine pattern that people have gone afield from, astray from, because they're not aligned with their instinctive, with all of their selves.
Well,
so they're masterminding destruction like greed does, like the acquisitional material mind does, devoid of spirit. And all of the tragedies that we're seeing on the planet and have seen, human trafficking, slavery, oppression of peoples, you name it, gender oppression and suppression.
Oh, so much.
Whatever it is,
absolutely.
I see that not as part of a divine pattern.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, you could say everything is, but I don't want to go there because that doesn't get us anywhere.
Well, no, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that we've gone off track.
Yeah.
But somehow this divine force is, or what Sri Aurobindo would call the supramental catastrophe, is powerful enough that it can even use, the inconsistencies and ignorance of the stage of our evolution
I can
to create beauty from there.
Oh yeah, yeah. So you
and
could
that
say
is
it's eminently adaptive.
It's eminently adaptive, and so in that sense, it's like, well, it's not to say that I don't do the best I can to support life.
Of course you do.
In every way possible.
Of course you do.
And stand up for human rights and animal rights and earth rights and
yes,
universal rights.
Exactly.
But not from a place of despair anymore. I think that's the difference from where it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a degree in peace studies, and I was very much into environmental, repatterning, and just remember feeling so hopeless and despairing because the more I understood about how we are destroying our home planet, the more despairing I became because I couldn't see any way out.
That's another story.
So it's like this is giving me a perspective, looking at a bigger picture, where, yes, there's lots of things to be aware of and not hide our heads in the sand, but at the same time, not to go into despair about one aspect of it, but look at the full picture.
You know, since we've gone this far down that path, I would say despair. I would agree with you completely, but I would say that there is a power in allowing oneself to feel the profound sadness and sorrow.
Oh, yes.
Which, you know, the other part of it is compassion.
Yeah.
Of the destruction of life as we have fomented it as humans on this planet, where we're supposed to be the leaders of living organisms on the planet, as the United States. I like that. United States. The United States is supposed to be a beacon of light to all other nations. And there's sadness in my and many hearts about it not fulfilling that idealized image. Right. So, too, humans not fulfilling. And so I feel in some ways, Kiara, like a Native American visiting Turtle Island, you know, despairing. Yeah, I guess there is a feeling of despair. But it's temporary. The real feeling is, what have we done? Yeah. How have we hurt our children and our other creatures? Right. And unlike not getting stuck there, I think is a very important thing. And then that could turn to depression, or that could turn to other destructive numbness or indifference or other destructive patterns.
Or closing our hearts down.
Exactly. I feel, unlike all of that, there's a huge amount of hope. Yeah. That even though, and I think it's important for people, like I tell some of my clients that guilt is a very good thing in proper doses. Yeah. It's not a bad thing. Yeah. It means your nervous system is very awake to some sense of the way things can be or should be. Do you know? Yeah. If you dwell on it and become obsessed by it, well, that's another story.
That's another story.
But if you utilize its intelligence to wake you up to making a better choice next time, God bless you, you're on the right path.
Yeah, so the distinction between despair and premature hope and true hope.
Okay, fine.
So, I mean, the premature hope is kind of like a Pollyannish thinking. Yes. Well, you know, ignore it, it'll go away.
Right.
And that's what a lot of religious faith comes in.
Right.
Things are going to be okay because somehow.
Or everything is in perfect divine order.
Yeah.
And therefore God will take care of it.
And that God is coming through us.
Exactly.
So that is the power and the responsibility that we are given, but it's a much bigger power than we dream of if we can take charge of it. So it's a two-edged sword, you know. It's like it wakes us up to the truth of what's going on, which is not always very pleasant. Yeah. But it also gives us the tools to change it, not from a place of combat and from a place of opposition, because we've done that. Exactly. Over and over again.
That's old news.
But from a place of reconnecting with that source energy in such a profound way that we actually, as we envision, so it becomes.
Exactly.
You know, that's coming from the supramental level of consciousness.
Yeah. It's coming from inspiration.
Yeah.
That you're inspired to act instead of against or what have you, as you said.
Exactly. Right.
Or from anger, even for that matter. That's not a sound ground. Can you say that? A sound ground for action.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens.
Well, anger, again,
is
different from rage. Anger is something that's positive, that forces you to take action.
Exactly. Very much like the guilt can as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It has its place in the universe.
Yeah.
And it's just that when people stay stuck in it, as if they stay stuck in guilt or any other emotion. In other words, what you're saying is that no emotion is negative by definition. Everything has a context, as Richard Bandler of NLP used to say.
Yeah.
Everything has a place. It might not be a very big place, but it's a place, in our universe.
And that's what Ilahinoor, going back to that.
Please.
It's about, bringing this higher consciousness into our base emotions to create the alchemy of the divine human.
Yeah.
So it's taking what's already there, this matrix of this matrix of unconsciousness, bringing the light of consciousness into that, embracing that, loving who we are, not because we are, some fine creation at this point. We're still messed up pretty much, but loving the potential that's there and loving, loving what's here, seeing it already as divine. I mean, that's the perspective which allows it to become alchemized.
That's right.
And that's what love is. That's unconditional love.
That's right.
And what I realized at a certain point, which was so touching for me, if Mother Earth, as Gaia, as a living consciousness, wanted to get rid of us as aggressors on this planet, she could just shrug her shoulders in an instant and we'd be gone.
Yeah.
It could happen in any number of ways.
Talk about compassion.
Yeah, unconditional compassion, love, patience, these are the things. And, we've been a cancer on the earth. Of course we've been a cancer. We've wiped out our own home.
Yep.
That's what a cancer does. But the potential is there that we become part of a higher nervous system and assist her into the next step of her evolution as well, which is this planetary organism, this next stage that we all achieve. And it cannot happen without human nervous systems which are tuned enough to these cosmic levels that we can anchor that divine frequency. And it doesn't mean that every single human person has to do this. Maybe just a critical mass. And whatever that critical mass happens to be, which I believe we've possibly reached. But it's a matter of timing, it's a matter of focus, it's a matter of surrendering to something bigger than ourselves that's now coming in stronger and stronger. And then I think there's we talked about Don Alejandro Cirillo. What he said is when you start going through this 3 days of darkness, celebrate. This is what you've been waiting for all your lifetimes. So we were there with him in Guatemala about 5 years ago, and talking about the Mayan calendar and so on. And he was very clear, don't worry about dates. That's not what our calendar system is about. It's about the shift from linear time or linear consciousness to galactic time or multidimensional consciousness. And this is that shift from being a victim to being a creator. And this is the moment we've long awaited, so celebrate it.
That's right.
And this is the magnetic reversal. And it's a cyclical process. It's periodic. It's regular, so we can count on it. It's just, it's not an if, it's a when. And we can narrow it down, significantly, even though I don't think anyone can put a date on it, really. But we can say, well, given certain signs and conditions, this time may be soon. Given the fact that the magnetic axis is tilting so rapidly, given that we're seeing aurora borealis phenomenon further and further southwards, given that we are physically, emotionally, mentally going through so much upheaval in our own bodies. This and this is not a bad thing. A lot of people are experiencing challenges in their physical bodies, experiencing these massive ups and downs in their emotional bodies, experiencing the complete loss of identity on a mental level.
But the reality is they always have.
But it's accelerating now.
That's what is said.
Yeah.
That is what is said.
Well,
it may be true.
It may be.
But it might not be true.
Well, it could be that, this is what it's a good excuse to.
Right. That's what I was getting to.
Yeah.
I personally think it's a belief system that people use to explain
like
why.
Mercury retrograde,
Like what?
Like Mercury retrograde.
Yes, exactly. That kind of idea. So it's not that it doesn't have some
validity.
Yes, it has some, but not what people say, People can still communicate during Mercury retrograde.
Yeah.
And very successfully.
Well, I think that's the idea.
And we have evidence of it.
If we can learn to link up with the higher systems.
Yes.
And not be so caught up in the subconscious systems, then actually our functioning is even clearer, more efficient, stronger, higher, all those things.
Exactly.
It's only when we are out of touch with who we are that we start losing it.
Exactly. I wanted to share a little story with you about Don Alejandro, Kiara, which is I was with him and a lot of other people at the UN a couple of years ago when he and the other elders came and the grandmothers, and I was actually across the street. And they did a beautiful presentation and everything, and then there was a question and answer period, and I turned to him and I said, Don Alejandro, one question. December 22nd, 2012. What's that going to be like? And in his wisdom, he looked out the window. It was a beautiful day in New York, and it was sunny and everything. He went, like that. It's going to be the same as December 21st.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I so appreciated that.
Yeah.
Because to me, there's so much hoopla.
Yeah.
And it was, to me, it was a beautiful reason for a party. And,
and it's unfortunate that so many people took a specific date as year zero.
Because that's people.
And focused on that date as the end or beginning of something. It's almost like an escape. We don't like what we see.
There we go. Yeah.
And we think that we can escape from it without having to do something.
That's exactly right.
So I know a lot of people are really bummed out that they were still here on this planet, that, the ETs haven't come in and changed everything. Or
people who are living in these fantasy worlds about the nature of reality, and they just get on a spiritual bandwagon thinking that somehow they're going to be liberated from Earth, that's a good thing. Then rather than liberating themselves from their own peculiar thinking and feeling, that's what liberation needs to happen.
And that's
so they can really enjoy the creation.
I think there's a lot of that in New Age spirituality.
Yes.
This magical thinking.
Oh,
which is,
yes.
There is a magical thinking which is positive and supportive.
Right.
But there is a magical thinking that puts us into escapist. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Kiara Windrider, I've got to just say, it's such a pleasure to see you.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to have you in New York after all of these years.
Yes.
And we've only actually been together in India, Mother India, so it's really a pleasure to bridge the oceans and have you here.
Yeah, it's wonderful to reconnect in this way. And, we could keep talking for hours, I think, but...
And I think we will.
We will, yeah.
Exactly.
If people want to check out my website, it's
Kiara
Windrider.
To give,
Kiara, www.kiarawindrider.net.
Spell it out for people.
KIARA WINDRIDER.
Beautiful.
And this Ilahinoor stuff that we're talking about, I'll spell that out. ILAHINOOR. And check out the website. There's all kind of books and things
Exactly.
that explain this.
And we have all of Kiara's contact information as well on our website, which you all know, www.abetterworld.tv. There's a link to Kiara and access to his books and everything right there. And you're in the United States teaching from coast to coast, a little in Hawaii, Providence, Rhode Island. Next will be upstate New York and Wyndham. And for any of you who may want to contact us and join us, contact me at 212-420-0800, 212-420-0800. Make sure to send your comments and your feedback to mjr@abetterworld.net, MJR, my initials, at abetterworld.net. Thanks so much for joining us.
And I'm sorry that we weren't able to respond to any questions. I heard the phone ringing a couple of times, but we are so caught up in our own conversation. But, feel free
the chance will occur.
Yeah. And if you have burning questions, if you want to email me through my website,
yes,
I'm happy
to
receive that too.
Beautiful. Kiara, thanks again for joining us on A Better World.
Well, thank you, Mitchell, for inviting me.
Absolutely. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll be here again next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Please join us and listen in for a touch of Mozart, and we look forward to seeing you all next week.